This is a vision I got May 25th, 2021. It's quite a few visions. The first one starts out from an aerial view of giant mountains that are filled with snow and pine trees and things like that. And the sky is actually pretty much blue with a few clouds in the sky. And as I'm looking down on this huge landscape, I see in the air that there is a missile that's been launched towards a mountain. And it shows up as a missile, but the words that I was hearing were that it was a man-made device. But when it was in its true form, it was in the form of a tree, one of the same old tree that was on the mountain, of the thousands of trees that there were covered in snow. This one looked identical to all the other trees that were there, but this one was repelling through the air at a great speed, barreling toward the mountain. And it hit the mountain, and it tunneled through the mountain, and you could see that it was like a light speed. There was light that was at the tip of it, that was just going all the way through, deep into the mountain. And after it did this, I could see that it started to create a sort of black hole that was pulling everything into this hole. Everything within its reach basically was being pulled into this black hole, all the trees and all the land and all these things. And then simultaneously at the exact same time, up above in the sky, in the heavens, the hands of the Lord came forth, and in his hands, he was holding some sort of orb or sphere, and in his hands, the comparison was probably 1.5 inches to 2 inches, but his hands were enormous and took up a large part of the sky. And he had this thing in between both of his hands, and it looked like he was creating it, that it was being created. And this orb was full of lightning and different colors of light. In the center of the orb, it reminded me of a light bulb. There's these two thin lines that light up in a light bulb. There was like these lines in the center of it that were being lit up as well. They looked blue to me. And so this orb was just full of power. Anyways, this was the very first vision that I saw. The second vision that I saw, it was again a picture, a landscape, and there was a huge mountain, and covered in pine trees. There was no snow, but it was covered in pine trees, and in front of it, right in front of it, snug up to it, was a highway. And the Lord, I believe, was saying it was a little town. It was just a tiny little town that would be insignificant if you blink and miss it. And back behind the mountain, off to the left side, were some other mountains. It was a whole mountain range, but you could see that that's where the highway had come from. And it sort of wrapped around this mountain, and there was a little town there. And then I could see back off by where the highway was coming from, that some water started to come, and it kind of came down the mountain, and it started to fill up underneath the bridge. There's actually a part of this I missed on the meeting, so I'm glad I'm having to record it. But the water started to come under the bridge, and it started to fill up so high that the water was so strong and coming forth so heavily that it broke the bridge. And there were cars on this bridge. There were cars coming and going. I could see their headlights, and the bridge was actually full of cars. And at this point, the bridge broke, and it just kind of fell apart, and the cars went kind of flying everywhere. And then after I saw this happen, I saw where the water had come from. It was way up in the mountains. The mountains basically touched the sky. And at that touching of the sky, there were hands. Now, I don't know if they were I believe they were actually two sets of angels. It could have been the Lord, but I believe that it was two sets of angels. And they poured the water out, actually. I saw it being poured out of some sort of, like, bowl, or it had a pouring spout on the end of it, but it was like a wide pouring. It wasn't like a little spout. It was a wide pouring. And I believe there was an angel on both sides dumping, with both their hands, dumping this water out, and it ran down the mountainside, sort of a, well, the sheer side of the mountain. Anyway, and then by the time it got down to where it broke the bridge, the highway bridge, it had, it had been going for a while when it had broken down through the bridge. And so then after this, I saw underneath this bridge, after the bridge had been broken in that spot, it was no longer accessible to be driven on. It was fully broken in half. It had been destroyed, basically, and crumbling. I could see down underneath the bridge that Emmanuel was there and some other people were there as well. And in his hands, he was holding a blueprint. And this blueprint was of how to restore and repair this bridge. And he had been pointing at it and talking with people and then pointing at the bridge and instructing people how to reconstruct and restore the bridge. And actually, we had spoken, Emmanuel and I, the day before about blueprints versus maps. So, and the importance of a blueprint type of life versus a map type of life. The third thing that I saw was a vision when we were praying for Tim. This vision, it started out in a subway elevator. Tim entered the elevator, and the point of view that I was getting this from was the security camera up in the corner top left of this elevator. And so you could see him get into the elevator, and he comes in, and I think he might be on his phone, and then he turns and he faces the door, so he's just on the elevator. And I see him get a message on his watch, and so he touches his watch, and then I see him on his phone again, and then I also see him with some sort of paper. It looked big and rectangular. I assumed it was, I can't see what's on it. I was assuming maybe a newspaper of some sort, or just a big rectangular piece of paper. And at this point, the elevator, it stops abruptly. It actually, something happens, and I believe he's going down at this point. And it stopped because of the way that it jerked stopped made me think it was going down. It kind of, anyway, it comes to a halt and it's broken. So out of his left sleeve, he pulls a long metal object that's able to pry open the elevator doors. I think it's actually made for prying open the elevator doors. Once he gets the elevator doors open, in front of him is some sort of material that I likened to, it reminded me of two things. It reminded me of insulation, like the pinkish, yellowish insulation that you would put inside of walls. Because when there was like a slit down the middle, and when he opened it, it actually looked like whale blubber, or it also just the look of it reminded me of insulation. I don't know why the whale blubber came to my mind, but it really did during this time. Anyways, in between this was like I would say 4-inch round cable cords or some sort of wiring they were black and they were all kind of intertwined with one another. And he pulled out a piece of this wiring, and he began to work with it. And after he worked with it for a little bit, he put it back in its place, and there was a switch, and he turned on the switch. And when he turned on the switch, it was almost like a light was coming on. I was saying that those fluorescent lights inside, up above, that kind of flicker a little bit before they turn on all the way. It reminded me of that. And it was a blue light. And so it kind of lit up a line of this blue light inside of this wiring. After this, he put it all back in, I was able to see, the Lord had me see what had happened up close. So I had missed it the first time. I just saw him fixing it and putting it back, and then the Lord had me see what was going on. And what ended up happening was this wire that he had to fix was very, very small and thin and intricate. It was very detailed. He had to have like a microscope, and he had to have very tiny tools to work this wire back in. And it was almost like a braiding of these wires back together that had to be done. But it was so small and intricate and small, and I did not catch that previously. So then that work was done, and that's when he put it all back. Now, after he put it back, he sort of gave it a strong tugging. The whole group of wires, the black wires, he gave it a strong tugging to make sure it was secure before he actually got onto the wires and began to climb up the wires to the top, to the very top of the elevator shaft. And when he got to the top of the elevator shaft, the same type of little orb that was in the hands of the Lord was at the top of this elevator shaft, except for it was huge to him. I would say it was maybe 6 feet, but it was in this shaft, so I don't know how large it actually was, but it was at the top. Now I could see Tim's face, and he had maybe one of the tools he was using in his mouth, like if you were to have your hands full, you'd put something in your mouth to hold it. He had that in his mouth, and he had a hat on, actually. I didn't mention that before. A baseball hat, actually. And he was climbing up sort of into the bottom space of this light that was really bright. It had the lightning, it had the different colors light, it just what the Lord was creating. That's what he was climbing up into. And at the very top, it sort of turned into, the wiring sort of turned into what might seem like a tunnel or a large tube of some sort, maybe a foot or bigger. And at the very top there was a screw-on lid to this, and the screw-on lid very much reminded me of, you would turn on a hose, but not, it was circular and metal, and he had to, with both of his arms sort of in his body, he had to grab hold of this and twist it open. And then once he grabbed hold of it and twisted it open, he all that light and all of the whatever that brightness was, it all started to funnel into this tube, and the tube almost like drank it.